Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. When John Depp House and Juliana Serrano came to me with this idea, I thought, wow, what a great idea. Prophets and Prophets, spelled two different ways, with a PH and with an F. And then the more we talked about it, the more I thought about the soundtrack of my life and how much I have changed, my family was changed, and the culture around me was changed because of popular music of the day. I will not date myself by talking about Cab Calloway, those kinds of folks of my childhood. But I am thrilled that we have some people who are with it about the popular music and social change of our day. So I'm very excited about it. I'm going to leave the introduction of Jeff and a wonderful surprise guest later to John Depp House. But I just want to remind you all that we are so very, very fortunate to have Juliana Serrano, who's the director of the Office for Creative Connections, and John Depp House, who's the director of Formation and Education for all ages, on our staff. And they are with it. They are hip. They're almost as cool as I am. And they had this wonderful idea. So John is going to do the proper introductions. I just wanted to say to everybody who's streaming, we were so glad you're here. If any of you would like to be on the mailing list that I send out an email blast every Thursday saying what's going to be happening on Sunday, we'd love to have you send in your information. We're in our giving month, and so we have pledge cards available. For those of you who can't get into church today, you can still pledge, because in pledging, you can help support this particular wonderful forum and others like it. We're very glad you're here. Will you warmly welcome to the microphone John Depp House and Juliana Serrano.
Good morning. So good to be here. So Jeff is here as a music industry president, but we met just over a year ago under different circumstances. In Jeff's other day job, he and his wife, Joanne Thrakiel, founded the Pavlov Foundation, which is a foundation that helps children and families who are dealing with pediatric cancer. And just over a year and a half ago, I finished my own treatment of a pediatric cancer, which I was diagnosed with as an adult. And so I was connected with Jeff personally, and we went on a bike ride last year from San Francisco to Los Angeles, raising all kinds of money and support for this organization. So I feel a very deep and tight bond with Jeff. I'm so grateful to call him a friend and to kind of share that mission together and helping with children and family with pediatric cancer. But in his other job, Jeff is the president of Elektra Records. He's the co-founder of both Cast Management with his wife, Joanne Thrakiel. As mentioned, they founded the Pablo Foundation. He also co-founded and was CEO of the Los Angeles-based Dangerbird Records. He's a huge-hearted, soulful, transformative leader, and I am grateful to call him a friend. Please extend a warm welcome to our presenter today, Jeff Castelaz. Juliana, get you started.
I'm going to start us off. Is this, there we go, it's hot. So can you first begin by telling us a little bit about Elektra Records and Dangerbird Records and how they compare to other record labels in the industry?
Sure. So Elektra Records, which I currently run, is owned by a giant corporation called Warner Music Group. And our offices are just down the road from here in Toluca Lake. So for me to get here from my office is a real joy, because it's like about 10 exits on the freeway. It's sort of our backyard here. Dangerbird Records is a label that I started with my wife in our guest bedroom in Silver Lake. And as a music manager, as a manager of bands and producers, I kind of got to a place where I was fed up with dealing with other labels as a manager, managing bands and making records for record labels as a producer manager. I kind of thought that, well, there's 100 stories of this in Scripture, but I came up against an obstacle in my own mind and through my own perception, which was that labels really sucked. at the thing that they were supposed to be good at, which was sort of like helping people to get ahead and helping people to realize their dreams and to have their voices heard on a big scale. So they're very good for too few people, and then there's lots of people, lots of artists on their rosters who they sign, put a lot of money into, and they just sort of get thrown out the back door because there's just not enough to go around. And so, again, it was my perception of an obstacle or a problem, and I thought, well, if I think I'm so smart and I'm so aggravated by this condition, I should just start my own label and see if I could maybe do my thing with a handful of artists and try and do a good job. And bring my heart to it and bring a sort of a conscientious, concerted effort, again, to a small group of artists and try and do a good thing. It's sort of like a sports movie or something where you see a coach who comes into a high school and the football team is totally unruly and the football coach does his thing to get them all motivated, and suddenly they start winning. It's like Bad News Bears. That's what I did. Danger Bird is basically Bad News Bears.
Would you describe Danger Bird Records as more of an independent label by comparison to Elektra?
It was entirely independent, like so independent that its only connection to the world was a few strings of like tiny little strings, and if one of them got a little bit frayed, we would fall off the cliff. Financially, you know, which we can get into. There's lots of stories in scripture about this. And so in taking over Elektra Records, which is owned by a big corporation, we're a division of Warner Music Group, which is a big corporation, with lots of huge artists, good cash flow, things like that. It was a big relief to me after being out on my own for 10 years with my own label, which got very scary. Simply because people are buying less music. And actually what's more significant than that is that big retailers, Walmart, Target, Best Buy, being the three biggest physical retailers in America, are simply paying less for the wholesale price of CDs. Yeah. Right? So there's two things happening at the same time. And one of them, the price that people are paying wholesale, is like how much water is under your boat. And the amount of people who are actually buying CDs is sort of like the speed with which you're rowing your boat. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And I can assure you that having more water under your boat is way more important than how fast you're going in your boat. So it got very challenging owning a small label, and very, very trying for me on an emotional and spiritual level. I started to really question, why am I doing this, and how much pain am I willing to endure as a business owner to help others. And so right around the time when I was really thinking about how I was going to stop operating my own label and switch into just being a manager of artists and record producers, which I was always doing, I got offered to run this big label. So it was like, through no design of my own, like, basically someone just appeared in front of me and said, hey, how would you like to do this? And I said, I would like to do it very much, thank you. Yeah, that's basically the story.
So we're going to show a part of a music video in a moment, but first I wonder if, Jeff, you could just on a somewhat philosophical level, based in your kind of world of music, when you hear the title Profitable Profits, Exploring Social Change in Pop Music, briefly, what comes to the surface for you?
Well, for me, I think that I connect very much with those words and with the title of this program, because I feel, and I said this the last time I was here, I think. I didn't review the game tape before I came in. There's a part of me in being a colleague, a comrade, also a leader in business, that I recognize that it's nothing to do with me. Most of it has nothing to do with me. I'm just, my body does certain things that I did not design it for. Some people call it God, some people call it the universe, some people call it, I don't know what, a turtle. Whatever one believes in. I believe that we all have God-given gifts, and our bodies and our minds and our mouths do certain things, and we can sort of foster those things and develop those things. But at some level, if we have a need to express, we're going to express. If we have a need to sort of be a leader and someone who can gather up somebody else's strengths and help them to have their voice heard, which I think is my thing, then you're going to do that. And when I hear the term profitable profits, I think that it describes something that I feel about my own life. I'm not responsible for whatever this talent is or whatever this sort of predilection is, but I am responsible for, once I feel it and once I kind of get going with it, for fostering momentum in this aspect of my life, which turns out to be most of my life. So if I'm good at this, I should really focus it and figure out how I can harness it enough to be of service to others. So that's what it means to me.
So we're gonna, if we can get the lights, we're gonna show a portion of a music video. Some of you may know that Jeff was hanging out on the Ellen DeGeneres show fairly recently, and one of his bands, Fences, was playing this past Wednesday on the show. And this is a collaboration with hip-hop artist Macklemore, who some of you surely are aware of. He had the song Same Love, which is a really strong statement about LGBT equality. And so maybe just say a word about this collaboration, and then we'll play a part of the video.
Yeah, briefly. Christopher Mansfield, who is Fences, who you'll see in the video, and once you see him, you'll never forget him. He's from Seattle. Macklemore, whose name is Ben Haggerty, is from Seattle. And they had been friends forever from growing up. And they've been collaborating for many years. This is the third song that they've collaborated on. The first one was called Other Side, which was the first song that Macklemore and Ryan Lewis ever collaborated on. It's a song about the fact that hip-hop artists never talk about the other side of the money, the drugs, the women, the partying, and there's tax bills, there's children, there's child support, there's all these things that no one ever talks about. Hence, Other Side. That song has over 40 million YouTube views, and it's only ever been released on YouTube as a video. They also co-wrote the song 10,000 Hours, which is the opening track on the now very, very famous Macklemore record, The Heist, which has sold something in the order of 4 million copies worldwide and has spawned 3 #1 pop singles in America and in most other countries in the world, including Same Love. And so for many people, they think, oh, this is just some record company situation. They got Macklemore to collaborate with this guy. It turns out this is an inside job from a bunch of kids, not unlike, growing up in Pasadena or South Pass. These guys just grew up in Seattle, which is a tight-knit, cool community of people who are trying to get up and out of it. Even though Seattle is a big metropolitan, amazing city, a lot of artists struggle to get noticed and get out of there on a national and international level. And so the great thing about this song is that now that Macklemore and Ryan Lewis are like truly some of the biggest stars, I mean, Ben is one of the most recognizable celebrities on earth right now. And for good reason, because he actually stands for something more than just being a famous dude. And they turned around when we were making this record and they said, hey, we want to help you out. You helped us out back in the day when we were nobody and you were like in Spin magazine, and so we thought you were like a big rock star. And they turned around, and this was an existing Fences song. Ryan reproduced it and turned it into this song. It was sort of a very quiet, folky, indie song, and he turned it into this, which you'll see. And this video took 7 days to make and cost $700,000, which is an unbelievable amount of money these days. And Ben and Ryan actually got T-Mobile, the telephone company, to pay for it. So again, there's this whole spirit of like, hey, we've made it to where we are. Let us help you out so that you can have your voice be heard. There's a theme here, right? Yeah. People helping other people out and using the position they're in and to be able to help somebody else out. So do we hit play on this thing?
So I wish we had time for the whole video. We're queued up about 1.5 minutes in, but if we can get lights, we'll just play this and then respond to. Go ahead and hit play. We should do it. He said he was going to bring him today. Next time, maybe.
I should have woken him up.
All of our youth would have been here for that.
So I'm going to read a small portion of these lyrics from these songs and then just ask a question out of that as we go forward. I'm going to try to restrain myself from rapping as I read this. You don't want a rapping priest. Okay. So this is from some of the Macklemore lyrics. Out of breath on the treadmill of the famous, he makes mistakes, tells stories to his paintbrush. And when the world finally sees his art, he wishes that he would have never made it. And you're becoming suffocated by the weight, can't hit those brakes. This is what you wanted, but you got it all in vain because you forgot who you are, right as the world learned your name. When God gives you everything, everything that you ever asked for, and it still looks a bit different than when you pictured it on that back porch. And I'm gone, world traveler, all I got is my songs. When the nights start blending into one another, all I want to do is free fall. And I'm so caught up and I'm so tired, swore that I wouldn't stare into the light. And guess who tried it? I'm blinded by this limelight. It's all night, it's all day, these bright lights. Once you turn them on, you can't walk away. I came too far, I'm too great, but I'm too scared and I'm too afraid to stare this world into its face. And so the question is, how do you work with the potential shadow side of big money and fame in the industry?
Well, I think the most important thing is to remember that it's not real, and it's not about any individual person. It's not about me, it's not about you, it's not about Macklemore. So it's a very tricky thing to say, so let me back up and sort of give some perspective on that statement.
Yeah, what do you mean by not real?
Expressing how you feel in art is real if it's great. But all of the stuff that comes with it, all of the attention, people recognizing you, people wanting to project onto you all the stuff that they think, that's not real. Because the art was done in an ideal sense because it had to be done. That thing I talked about earlier. That, you know, my passion, speaking about my little part in all of this, which is as a facilitator for creative people, is being done because I have an insatiable need to help other people to have their voice heard, to protect them, to advocate for them. That's my job, is to be an advocate for people who express themselves through music. There's nothing about being recognized in public or getting accolades or making lots of money that has anything to do with that. I would be doing that if I was standing on the sidewalk and finding somebody who had some sort of a gift that I thought other people could benefit from or would enjoy. And if you take that one step further, I believe that the artists always have to remember that whatever's coming out of their mouths or their fingertips, as it were, however dazzling they may be as a performer or a musician or a singer, this is my belief, is that that is a God-given thing that is given by the universe. It's not it's not for someone to control or manipulate, right? And so it's about the motivation.
But you can't deny that money plays a huge role in the artist getting a platform to share their message, to share what's on their heart and mind. I mean, when you say $700,000 to make a video, and I mean, thankfully because of that, I mean, it's gaining attention, don't you think?
Yeah, but that's not, but it's not the goal. You know, a profitable situation, if that's your goal, that's fine. I mean, I don't criticize anybody for feeling that way, but there has to be a purpose beyond profit. And I always believe that people who recognize that purpose beyond the profit, which is the heart-centered thing, the spirit-centered thing, the thing that's centered around, I have an insatiable need to communicate. You know, most people are communicating their hurt in their life in some way, or their joy for something in life, their passion for something. And those things attract other people because other people say, wow, I wish I could say that. You have a really good talent for saying that, and you're saying it in a way that I could never say or I don't feel safe saying. And you know, good songwriters figure out the phrase that pays, and they construct a 3-minute sort of, you know, vignette around that, and hopefully other people are attracted to that. So money becomes a tool in our business. And again, there's nothing wrong with doing well and having a nice home and a horse or something, but you know, if that's your thing, or like a nice car, don't get me wrong. But I can guarantee you that we could go through the internet right now and look at, you know, artists who are what I would call totally vital artists, and you'd be able to differentiate between them and people who are, you know, false prophets, who don't write their own songs, who are just motivated by fame and chart success and the apparency of money and wealth. For me, it's very easy to see the difference. You know?
Yeah.
So we're going to enlarge the context of this conversation a bit. In order to do that, we have a special guest that we're going to invite up to the stage. Joe Henry, would you come on up and join us a moment and take my chair, actually? For those of you who don't know, Joe Henry is an American singer-songwriter, guitarist, and Grammy Award-winning producer. He has released 13 studio albums and produced multiple recordings for other artists, and we're very grateful to have him as an All Saints parishioner joining this conversation. Thank you, Joe.
My pleasure. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, and so as we prepared this, we had a little in-staff email banter going on, throwing out different artists looking back on the 60s and 70s and 80s. We had some names like Bob Dylan, Joan Baez, the Beatles, Aretha Franklin, Sam Cooke, Leonard Cohen, Michael Jackson, Carlos Santana, U2, and Madonna, and there are many more, of course. And so another point to make here, the definition of a prophet, or one definition of a prophet, is a person who advocates or speaks in a visionary way about a new belief, cause, or theory, or one gifted with more than ordinary spiritual and moral insight, especially an inspired poet. This is some definitions of a prophet. And so with that in mind, looking back on different stages of your life, what artists rise to the surface for you as prophets, personally, or those who you see as particularly enacting social change in different eras?
I mean, me personally, well, I was born at the very end of 1960. So, and in North Carolina, I grew up largely in the Southeast, at least through the 60s. So, you know, Bob Dylan was very much in my consciousness from the time I was 9 or 10, and I understood sort of instinctively that he was, you know, not only a significant, you know, life-changing personality, but that he was a significant part of the engagement with our culture. I mean, for a lot of us, that was our window into it. You know, he abstracted things that could only be seen in that way once they got disassembled. In my adult working life, I've spent a lot of time working and traveling with Harry Belafonte, who he's 85 now, and just as much invested, as deeply invested in his role, you know, as a truth speaker, as a changer of the culture, and he insisted anybody around him adopt that same posture in whatever way they can, or he's got no time for you. He was somebody I was aware of, you know, as a very young man, a young boy when Dr. King was killed. I lived in Atlanta, where his church was, and I remember seeing Harry on a black and white TV walking with the funeral procession through the streets of Atlanta. That was my first memory of this face, and when I encountered him, you know, 6 years ago for the first time, that same face was still there, insisting to me and insisting to everybody that they'd be involved. And he's significant to me and to many for that reason, yeah.
Jeff, do you want to speak to that question?
Well, I think that music itself has always spoken to me since I was a little boy. Definitely before I started kindergarten, I felt the power of music. And it wasn't sort of an intellectual, theoretical thing to me. It was something I felt inside my body. So my first answer is just that. And whether it was the songs of Neil Diamond or the Beatles, to name two artists that I heard a lot in my house as a little boy, I just felt the power of music and the expression from within a song, and the tension that you can build up within a song like the Beatles' Love Me Do, you know, and then it releases in the chorus, you know. They build this tension up in the verse and they release it in the chorus. That, you know, I'm sort of addicted to that thing about songs. I want songs that really make me feel something and get me wound up. And so, just to reflect off something Joe said, I wasn't alive when Martin Luther King was, but of course, thanks to film and audio recording, I was able to see him in my own life. And I feel that same way when I see someone like Martin Luther King who's speaking about something real and something that had to be changed, or it still does have to be changed. To be really blunt about it, the music that I like the most is music that expresses some sort of rage or describes some form of injustice. And within a song, an artist gets to be the judge and the juror, gets to be the villain and the hero, or gets to just describe something that they think is really crappy. And they get to set it up and knock it down. And I love that feeling. I'm not much of I don't like pretty songs in particular. I don't like things that are like novel. I like things that are a little bit aggressive. So specifically in music, it was Neil Diamond, the Beatles, and then it was the Smiths, a band from Manchester, England, and a band from right here, Van Halen, who are from, you know, literally these streets right here. And their music described to me as a young boy in Milwaukee a few things. One was this sort of vignette or postcard of California, of Los Angeles, in some weird way. The music is very puerile, it's very teenage, it's very sexual, it's over the top, right? But it's also, it was also just impossibly musical. These guys all met at PCC right here. They used to rehearse at the theater on Raymond Avenue. David Lee Roth, the singer, still lives over here off Orange Grove. So it was just ridiculous music. But again, I mean, we live in LA. It's a pretty ridiculous place. It's a pretty extreme place. But I will tell you that my favorite Van Halen songs to this day are the dark ones. Are the really, you know, like Mean Streets and things like that, the minor key, very dark things. And so my answer is more of a tonal answer. I like music that is a little bit dark, a little bit edgy, and takes me on a weird journey. If you look at the bands I've signed, they all could be described perhaps in this way. I mean, this dude Fences is like, you know, about to start crying all the time. I mean, he's like, you know, his songs are not like happy pop songs.
That being said, can you share with us what new artists you are connecting to these days that you find have prophetic messages?
I only sign artists that make me feel something. Somebody could come to me, Joe could come to me tomorrow and say, dude, I have this artist I've been developing, you're gonna make $10 million off this. If I didn't feel it in my heart, I would say, thank you. Let's go talk to somebody else in our company, or let's figure out who else we can talk to. So I will only sign things that I feel strongly about. I have a young band from Provo, Utah. They're all Mormon dudes, which means they're a really cheap dinner date because they don't drink alcohol.
Or soda.
They drink soda. They don't drink coffee. I have to actually ask them about that. How does this exactly work? Anyway. You know, these guys are writing really great songs, and they learned music in their church upbringing. So they learned how to play, and then they had a lifelong stage to play on in church and at church/family gatherings. So it's a really kind of a cool thing. The Moth and the Flame, Fences. We have a young artist from Nottingham, England, called Saint Raymond, who is on tour with our artist Ed Sheeran. Some of you may have heard of Ed Sheeran. Of course, this is on the internet, so of course I'm going to forget somebody. But those are three artists I can think of off the top of my head who I really think the world of, and I have a lot of energy to help do something.
I'd like to just invite Joe to respond in this conversation, and then we're going to open it up to some questions for a few minutes. So if you want to follow up on that.
Oh, just quickly, I won't name any specific names, but I do recognize that there is a great movement of really young people who are reinvigorated with folk music forms, and are really, and that music is built on storytelling. Each of us sharing our stories with each other. That's what that music. That's why it happened. That's why it has endured. And there are a lot of individual artists, singer-songwriters, young bands in Brooklyn, for instance, all over, that are tapping into the very unique power of narrative song, for the very reason that we're sharing stories, and the notion that a song exists for engagement, not necessarily just writing your own name in the sky, but offering a point of view that people recognize. And I think that's very viscerally alive right now, and it's wildly encouraging, and has very little to do with the marketplace per se, but it's very much alive.
Very true.
Let's open up for some questions for Jeff and Joe.
Thank you very much for this topic and your statements. I've been curious for some time about what it is that takes a young man out of an evangelical Christian family and makes him a huge, huge star, Justin Bieber. And I don't know, he seems to be falling apart. I think the industry has done that to him, myself, but I'd like your comments about it. And Britney Spears may be another one. At any rate, we can read about what happens to them, and it's tragic.
I think Joe is the perfect man to answer that question. Because this guy has corrupted more people than...
No, I would just say that I think overall, and whether you're talking about music, sports, film, TV, that kind of attention that you're describing, which by the way has very little to do with music, it's a cult of personality, and it's not good. It's not healthy for anybody. I've been around. I don't normally operate in the in the mainstream music world. I'm much more underground than that. Though I do, as a producer, work with some artists who are very much mainstream. But I'm just going to say that kind of cultural focus on personality, which has nothing to do with artistry, is not healthy for anybody. And anybody who walks around with a vision of themselves that's informed by the kind of attention you're describing has a completely distorted view of themselves and their role in their community, and that's just sort of a fact.
Yes, I agree.
I'm wondering, as you discuss with a new artist or a new band, whether you share your views and get to a meeting of minds, or you just perceive it in them.
I'm really glad you asked that question, because I wanted to talk about that today. I do talk about my self, which is to tell people things about my spiritual beliefs, my spiritual practices, and I usually do it on the first date or the second date with an artist, and I love seeing their eyes pop out of their heads. It's the best. Even these dudes, the Moth and the Flame, these LDS kids, they, I think they were a bit shocked that I was that I had a spiritual life, and the lead singer Brandon was very shocked that I get up at 5 in the morning, and he noticed that I emailed him back at like 5:15 a.m. once, and he was like, "Why were you up that early?" And I explained to him the whole notion of creating time, and I have to have time for my spiritual self and to get my body and my heart moving and have that connection, because otherwise, the day takes you. So I do it all the time. I I find it to be pretty awesome and pretty fun to shock people. And then if either they're shocked and they run away, or they're shocked and they tiptoe into it and start asking you questions. But you know, we're in a city and we're in an industry that is, you know, the sort of like the most popular stories are the ones where people have no inner life at all. And I don't care whether you're Christian or what have you, right? I mean, you could be atheist and be into meditation. It doesn't matter to me. But most people that I come across in our business do not have any discernible inner life at all. They're just sort of like bumping through the day, trying to have their little games of ego and nonsense, and then that ripples through their whole lives, you know? So I try to have games of ego and nonsense, but I also like meditate in the morning, so whatever. I thought that would get a bigger laugh.
So my question is, does music drive the culture, or does it reflect the culture? And can music create revolution? Or can you give some examples where that happened?
Well, I was involved in a documentary film about the great folk singer Woody Guthrie, and the very last question I was asked was, you know, can music change the world? And without thinking, without knowing I believed it, but I recognized that I did when I said it, I said, no, but it can change you, and you can change the world. Right. I mean, I think we have to just keep in mind that music is language. And just same with the question before, you know, when people come, you know, are you looking for what their interior life might be offering? I mean, it's all in the song. It's all in the language. And it, you know, does it change the culture? Does the culture change it? The answer to both is yes, because it's our shared language, and they're all co-evolving all the time, as we have to be, I think.
I agree. I manage a band called Dropkick Murphys, who are from Boston, Massachusetts, and their biggest song is called I'm Shipping Up to Boston, and it's a Woody Guthrie lyric that he never wrote a song to. And the lead guy in the band was the last person to ever go to the Guthrie archive before it went to the Smithsonian, and he asked Woody's daughter Nora if he could take this very short lyric. It wasn't even the longest thing, you know, wasn't really a song. And he said, you know, could we turn this into a song? And she said, well, that would be great. And, you know, the band has done very, very well with it. And so that's an interesting Woody Guthrie thing. And Woody Guthrie described so much of the world, just to use him as an example, he described so much of the world prior to the internet. He was at least a few years before the internet, and he was describing places and things and conditions and lifestyles that most people had never seen except through his songs. And then maybe they could go to the library and look things up in an encyclopedia or something. Really, I love that part of music. And so the thing I want to say is that I think that in hip-hop and pop, which is very, very fabricated, very manufactured music, that's usually describing a fantasy state. Even when hip-hop artists, many hip-hop artists are talking about this or that, most of it's complete nonsense about how much money they have and this and that. I always say to my son, who's 20, who's a big hip-hop fan, well, the day a rapper comes out with a song or an album about paying their taxes, then I'll believe it. You know what I'm saying? Because trust me, no one who doesn't write their songs is making $50 million in 2014. So that form of music I find to be maybe affecting culture because it's a fantasy, it's fun. But some of the stuff like where Joe comes from, I believe he and his peers are describing life in a way and then reflecting that back into the culture. So my answer is that both things happen. It just depends on who the artist is.
I would only add to that if Harry Belafonte were here with us, he would beg to differ with you about the way that hip hop as a language is offering a view into some reality. I mean, Harry, and when we were traveling together, we were in Europe. He was researching a film that I think he still intends to make about how hip hop began as community and how it got sort of co-opted, by the record industry to be what it is now. And he said, his whole point is when we were traveling, we were in Berlin together, in London, and in Paris. He was summoning the most significant hip hop artists in those areas and sitting them down at a table and saying, "Why have you let your message be co-opted? Why have you let a music industry that doesn't respect you steal your language?" Because he sees that language as a part of American folk music and folklore as he sees Woody Guthrie, who he loves, like I love Woody. But Harry is very much a voice, in regard to looking at any genre of music as just one more window into our shared humanity. There's the part of it that gets all the attention, and then there's the real stuff under that very thin layer, I think, in all of it.
One more question for you. Yeah, my question is kind of simple. The big difference between the music today and the music that I grew up with is that I could understand the lyrics of the songs that I grew up with, and I can't understand the lyrics today. Now, my question is that just because I'm not able to pick up the words, or is that by design?
I like that last part.
I don't personally believe it's by design. I think every one of us, have been conditioned to see, our real-time life happening, and we recognize ourselves in it, and we recognize ourselves in where we came from. Harder to project ourselves forward to the next group of people who are coming up and mutating the language and fashion and everything that goes along with it. You got to keep in mind that when the bebop musicians in jazz, the great swing players couldn't hear that music, and then the beboppers couldn't hear what Ornette was doing, and on down the line. We recognize the language that we grew up with. It's harder to make the leap to how that language gets changed by the next group of people who are using it to their own service. I don't think that people are intending to leave you out, is what I mean to say.
But I would say that I appreciate that you appreciate the words. Whenever I have so many lyrics from my bands on the coffee table in my office, and a lot of times when we're making an album, or if I'm sort of falling in love with an artist who I think I might want to sign, I'm constantly emailing the band or the manager to send me the lyrics so I can read them. I think it's really important to hear what people are actually saying. It's the thing. So I just appreciate you raising the topic at all.
As a songwriter, I should have said that right off the bat, too. Forgive me for not.
So we need to wrap up. Thank you, Jeff and Joe, for your insight and your time today. Let's give them a round. Thank you.